We're in our blessing our community series. The Church of the Nazarene is trying to help churches in the USA Canada region begin to win, and this is part of the strategic focus that they're helping launch and roll out into churches all across the area. And so, just a quick review. The first week we talked about who we are being a neighbor to. That the question that Jesus turns the question from the Luke passage of the Good Samaritan from Luke chapter 10 on its head. And he asked the question, so who was the neighbor at the end? And so we asked the question, who are we being a neighbor to? Who is God challenging us to be a neighbor to? Last week, we talked about what is our identity, what we believe about the church. And so let me just give you a brief, if I were to summarize our article of faith on the church, this is what it would say. We confess Jesus is Lord and are transformed partners with God. We are knit together by the Holy Spirit and His Word in peace to worship, serve, and obey God in Jesus, telling the world who God is and how important He is. We are reconcilers and disciple makers, going, showing, and telling, teaching and modeling, compassionate and just, like our God, because we are telling the truth about God and the world. So if you were to summarize our article of faith, that's how I would do it. Today, we're asking the question, what kind of eyes do we have? Now, when someone asks you that question, you might tell them what color of eyes that you have. So let's just do this real quick. How many of you have brown eyes? Okay. How many of you have blue eyes? Wow, a lot of blue-eyed people here. How many have green eyes? Okay, got some green eyes. How many have purple eyes? No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if that, maybe you do. If you have red eyes, we need to have a talk. So, hazel. Oh, yes, hazel. Any hazel? We got a couple hazel. Okay. The color of the iris dictates the color of the eye. And irises are classified among one of 6 colors: amber, blue, brown, gray, green, and hazel. Although our unusual pattern of thought when asked about what kind of eyes we have is to think about the color, today I want us to consider a different response as we continue to look at the parable of Jesus in Luke chapter 10 of the Good Samaritan. Because in this parable, we are exploring how Jesus talked about 3 kinds of people and 3 kinds of eyes. So if you have your Bible, you can turn to Luke chapter 10 again. And I just want to reread this story so that we're all familiar with it. And starting in verse 25, just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. Oh, those lawyers. Teacher, he said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And he said to him, what is written in the law? What do you read there? He answered, you shall love the Lord with all your heart and all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, you've given the right answer. Do this and you will live. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell into the hands of the robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now by chance, a priest was going down the road, and when he saw him, he passed on the other side. So likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed on the other side. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity or compassion. And he went to him, and he bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, and he brought him to an inn and to take care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, 2 days' wages, and gave them to the innkeeper, and said, take care of him. When I come back, I will repay you whatever you spend. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell in the hands of the robber? He said, the one who showed mercy. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. So as we go through this story, first of all, we recognize the scene. This man has been robbed. He's been beaten, and he's been left half dead. He's been stripped of all his valuables, his clothes, and he's beaten so severely, he's described as somebody who's almost or halfway dead. Now, there was a movie when I was a kid called The Princess Bride. And he brought the gentleman to the wizard, the wonder worker, and he said, "We think he's dead." And he said, "Oh, no, 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 no. He's only mostly dead." So here we are. He is half dead. He's in a pickle. He's in a bad spot. He's tore up. He's beaten. Probably wouldn't even barely be able to see him maybe if you moved too quickly from the side of the road. But the first person to arrive is a priest. Hooray! The priest will come and he'll save the day. He arrives on the scene, and we're told that he is going down. Now, presumably this is not a real story. This is a parable, and so it's not a historical telling. And so Jesus orchestrates the characters and the setting and the scene very specifically to tell us some important details. And so we're told that the priest is going down. Now, if you are making your way from Jerusalem to Jericho, Jerusalem is up high, Jericho's down low, which means it's very rocky, it's very craggy. There's a lot of, you're going up and down and twisting through these canyons. It would have been a very dangerous road. But it also means that the priest is coming from Jerusalem down to Jericho, which means he's leaving. He's been doing his duty. He's finished. He's at the end of his shift. Now, if a priest was going down, again, he's likely finished with his ministry duties at the temple, and he's heading home. Now, we all know what it's like at the end of the day, after a hard day's work, and then you're headed home. And all you want to do is go and maybe take a shower, kick off your shoes. You want to just sit down for a moment, maybe get a glass of tea or something like that, and you just want to sit down and you want to relax. You're looking forward to getting home after a long day. So the first set of eyes that Jesus sees on the crime scene, he sees the victim's needs, the wounds, the blood, the missing garments. And he would have been the most qualified to respond. He would have known that Yahweh had called his people to love your neighbor as yourself. He spent his entire day serving God, doing the things of God. As a priest, he would have memorized that passage. Yet, he avoided the situation. So the first set of eyes we see is he did not want to inconvenience himself and his plans. Now, you might say, well, what if he was afraid? And that's true. How many of you have been here in Albuquerque and some homeless person almost attacked you? Maybe not. Some of you have. Sometimes it's scary. You see people on the side of the road, or you see people who need help, and you're going, oh, man. Or you've got appointments. You've been waiting 6 months to get into the doctor, right? Or 6 years, whatever. And you've got your appointment set up, and it's for that day, and you drive by, and you see a mother on the side of the road in the freezing cold with her baby. Do you stop? Do you give her a ride? Or, I got that meeting. I've got that appointment I've been waiting 6 months for. I got to get there. The first set of eyes from the priest, who should know better, is inconvenience. The second person to arrive on the scene is a Levite. Now, in today's terms, we might compare the Levites to the associate pastors. The Levites were the assistants. They're the ones who helped get the things done. And so these Levites, the reaction of the Levite to seeing the victim was the same as the priest. He saw the victim, ignored his needs, and moved to the other side of the road. That is, got as far away from the victim as possible. And then went on their way. The second set of eyes that we see is abandonment. This man saw him in his condition. and chose not to help. The priest and the Levite abandoned the man on the side of the road. Have you ever been abandoned? Left in a needy condition and abandoned by those who should have helped you? Some of you have been hurt by even religious people. People who know better but don't do better. If you know what that's like, you know what it's like to be the man on the side of the road. But many times we know what it's like to be the Levite and the priest, with eyes of inconvenience and eyes of abandonment. The third person to come in is the Samaritan. We've talked about this before, but the Samaritan, in the minds of the ancient Hebrews, was the least likely to intervene on behalf of this Jewish man. Because the Samaritans were rival groups from the north who lived north of Jerusalem. They claimed to be descendants of the northern tribes of Israel, which had split away from Judah 950 years earlier. They split the divided kingdom of Israel between the 10 northern tribes and 2 southern tribes, Judah and Benjamin. The Samaritans claimed to be the descendants of the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh. The sons of who? Bible quiz. Yeah, you got it. All right. I'll have a piece of candy for you. Wait, no, I'm just kidding. I don't have a piece of candy. I will share an empanada with you. Okay. They split the divided kingdoms. They claimed to be descendants of the northern tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, who were Joseph's children from Exodus. They disagreed with the Jews about how and where to worship Yahweh. And they built their own temple on Mount Gerizim to rival the temple of Jerusalem. They were the second church of Israel. Some of you don't know. Okay, if you've never been around the Baptist world, right? Or if you go down south, there's like First Baptist, and then next to it is Second Baptist, and that's all the people that didn't like what was going on at First Baptist. They went over to Second Baptist. Yeah, we don't have second churches as the Nazarenes. We come up with creative names. We're like the Wellspring Church of the Nazarene or something like that. I had a creative name for a church, but I don't think it would be appropriate. So, all right. It had to do with Balaam. So, all right. Here we go. So, the third set of eyes that we see in this is compassion. It says he was moved to compassion. So, what does it mean to see something and to have compassion? The English word compassion is translated from a Greek word that means to be moved in your bowels. Yeah, that's right. To be moved in your bowels. Why? Because the bowels were thought to be the seat of love and pity. Now, why would you think that? What happens when you get that first feeling of love? What do you get in your stomach? Butterflies. You know, you get excited and you're, oh, my tummy. It is thought to be that in the Hebrew, it comes from a word, the word compassion comes from a word that literally means womb, a place of protection and nurturing, a place of safety and care. So, I like the Hebrew one better, you know. Now, when you feel something deeply, what do we say? We have a what feeling? A gut feeling. You see how this works? So it says he was literally moved in his guts when he saw this man on the side of the road. Did you know that Jesus had eyes of compassion too? Here's some times when Jesus had eyes of compassion. So in Matthew chapter 9, verses 36, he says, seeing the people, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed and they were downcast. They were like a sheep without a shepherd. They didn't have somebody to protect them, to nurture them, to guide them, to feed them. We see Jesus, when he came ashore, he liked to ride the boats. When he came ashore, he saw a large crowd and he felt compassion for them. Immediately, Jesus comes off of this boat and he looks at the crowds and he's moved in his guts. And he healed their sick. We see in Luke chapter 7, verses 13, it says about Jesus' response to the widow who had lost her son. When the Lord saw her, he felt compassion on her, and he said, "Do not go weeping." And then in Mark chapter 8, it records Jesus' response to the crowds who had been following him. It says, "I feel compassion for the people because they've remained with me for 3 days and have nothing left or have nothing to eat." 3 days, that's a long sermon. Aren't you glad I only like 30 minutes tops here? 3 days. And he had compassion on them. In each of these situations, Jesus was moved with compassion and took action to meet people's needs. So how do we develop eyes of compassion? Well, the first thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to have to take off our glasses of judgment. Do you know if I take my glasses off? So I just got some new glasses like a couple January, I guess, is when I got them. So a couple months ago. And whenever I got my new prescription, my eyes were updated. She told me I needed bifocals, but I didn't get them yet. So I'm holding out. I got my prescription, and I asked her, I said, what's my vision without glasses? She said, I don't know. I didn't check. She said, let's check it. We can check it real quick. So she throws up the biggest letter on the board, and she said, what is that letter? And I said, I have no idea. She said, oh. She said, well, it's probably somewhere around 2,300 something. So I'm blind. So when I take off my glasses, I literally just see shapes of people and colors. And these glasses shape the way I see your face. They shape the way I see you move. They shape the way that I see how you stand. And I mean, you could, if you were back there and you were moving, I'd have no idea what you were doing. But I put my glasses on and I see, and this is how it works. We all have glasses, and unfortunately, sometimes the glasses are judgment. That's easy. It's easy for us to see the needy people as deserving their plight. They shouldn't have gotten themselves into this predicament. They should have planned better. That's what they get for being lazy. They should get a job and work like I do. Perhaps this is what the priest and Levite thought. And perhaps they inwardly condemned the victim of somehow deserving his misfortune. And maybe we're not that harsh. Maybe we just look at them and we think, well, you know, that's too bad. Maybe they made some bad choices and bad decisions. And the truth is they probably have. But what I have found is that the assumptions that we make about people, we talked about this in staff meeting, actually 9 out of the 10 assumptions that we make about people are not right. And some of you are going, well, that one. And yes, while there are people who take advantage and who do different things and who are dangerous and all of that, and we have to be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves, we make assumptions about people all the time. And so if we want eyes of compassion, we're going to have to begin by taking off our glasses of judgment. The second thing is we remember that you are a servant. It's easy for us to question a person in need and why they are needy, and it's easy to make assumptions, but that's the job of a judge, and we're not called to be judges. We are called to be servants. When we move to the position of judgment, we elevate ourselves to the status of judge. And we begin to make assumptions as if we definitely know what caused the misfortune. But what if we're wrong? And what if we're trying to do something that's not our job? Guess whose job it is? It's God's job. Guess who's not good at doing God's job? We aren't. And in fact, it creates more chaos and more problems than anything. And Jesus and God have defined our role as not judge, but servant. The third thing is to apply the golden rule. If your position was reversed, what would you do? What would you want them to do for you? Now, all of us, especially if we know people, especially if it's our kids or grandkids, like, right, we want to move and we want to get things done and we want to make sure that they have what they need, and we will move heaven and earth to make sure that they get out of trouble or do whatever they need. But the so-called golden rule applies to all of us. It doesn't apply to some of us in some situations. Matthew 7:12 is Jesus speaking. "In everything, therefore, treat people the same way you want them to treat you. For this is the law and the prophets." Jesus says the truth that's contained in God's word, it points to a life like this. If we want to be people who walk in the truth, we're people who apply the golden rule. Finally, I made this up. I think I'm going to sell it to a shoe company. Just do it. I'm just kidding. I pay Nike royalties. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't. But the truth is that we will never have eyes of compassion until we actually step into the lives of people who are hurting and who are in need. As long as we continue to keep our distance from those people, we will never experience eyes of compassion. Having conversations, getting to know people's names. These are ways in which we develop eyes of compassion. Well, Jesus commended the Samaritan for his eyes of compassion, and he said, "Go and do the same." The compassionate eyes of the Samaritan saw the victim's need, made them a priority. He reasoned, there's a need, I can meet it, I need to change my schedule, I need to make it my priority. Do you have eyes of compassion or eyes of judgment? What are the needs you see in our community? Do you have eyes of compassion for those in need? Are your eyes of compassion moving you to take action? Because Jesus commended only the Samaritan because he had eyes of compassion that moved him to action. We can say we have eyes of compassion all we want to. And we might fully believe that in our hearts. But until we start making that a priority and moving that into action, it doesn't really count for anything. It must embody action. Because Jesus didn't say, go and think likewise. Go and do likewise. So, how do we practice eyes of compassion? How do we see, what kind of needs, who are we being a neighbor to in our community? And all of this stuff is so incredibly important. Why? Why is it important for us to bless our community? Why is this cycle of resurgence and blessing our community and going out and evangelizing and making disciples and coming together in unity? Why is all of this important? Because we have been called to be people of the gospel. We're a Great Commission people. We're a church who are partners with God, transformed by Jesus, to affect whatever little portion and corner of the world that we can. And the truth is, we can't save everybody. I know that. And here's the deal. But we can save somebody. We can reach out to somebody. We can take one step. We can do one thing. And it might not change everything, but it could change everything for that one person. And God says, it's worth it. And not only that, he commands us and commends us to go and do that. We want to be obedient. We want to see people come to a life-giving relationship with Jesus. We want to have eyes of compassion. I'm going to invite Pastor Elise to come up, and she's going to share with us some ways. But if you don't know, Elise is our outreach pastor, and she coordinates some of our outreach events and activities. And so she has some things in mind that she's helping, and that we need to give you tangible opportunities to be a neighbor and to exercise compassionate eyes.
I have quite a few of them, and so instead of me just standing up here for 20 to 30 minutes and giving like a PowerPoint presentation on all of them, and you would probably forget most of them anyway, we're going to do one a week for the next several weeks. And today's is unique because it provides us an opportunity to kind of partner with and practice community with other churches in our area. Pastor had mentioned last week about a movie put out by Angel Studios. It's about a laser eye surgeon from China who immigrated to the U.S., and it's his story there. He's actually going to be here in Albuquerque, which is really neat, but the problem was that his schedule was that he was going to watch a showing of the movie and talk to the people at the Chinese church up the road in the morning, and then in the afternoon he was going to come here and do it again, and then he was in the evening going to go to another church just outside of Albuquerque and do it again, and then he was going to fly out of state to somewhere else. And so to simplify that, and just to come together in unity with different churches, we're all going to meet at Berean Baptist Church. They have seating enough for 1,500 people. And so we're all going to go and watch it together, which is really exciting. And I would love to, I just want to encourage you, we have a great community here in our church, but if you go, maybe don't just sit with people from Heights. Maybe sit with somebody who's not from our church and get to know them. It's just exciting to remember that God has not just called us to be a family together, but we have a global church family, and we get to remember that and sit together and watch a movie together and talk with this brilliant surgeon, this brilliant man who has a brilliant testimony. So that's going to be May 11th from 1 to 4 p.m. At Berean Baptist Church. If you need more info, you can text me about it. But that's it. Until next week.